My friends and I like to take what we call an adventure weekend about 3 times a year. We met in college while we were brothers in Pi Beta Kappa. There's Jared, Max, and Raj, and me, of course. PBC is a forever kind of brotherhood, but we took it a little more seriously than most. We all live in different parts of the United States, but 3 times a year, we come together for these 3 to 5 day trips that are just epic. We've gone ziplining in Costa Rica, mountain climbing in the Rockies, whitewater rafting in Mexico, and diving in the Bahamas. We've been all over the world, and though it may seem a little excessive, so what? We're 4 unmarried guys with no kids and great jobs, so our income is still pretty much ours to blow as we see fit. So when Max said we should get a houseboat and go trolling up the coast for 5 days, we were all on board, pun definitely intended. So we met at a little port in Mississippi as he introduced us to the Trawler Queen. She was a 2-cabin houseboat with a living room, a party deck, 2 monster motors, and a galley with enough beer and snacks to keep the party going for 7 days and 6 nights. We were stoked to say the least, and as Max pulled us out of the marina, we knew this was going to be an adventure for the books. That statement would prove to be a little too prophetic. I haven't really properly introduced the guys yet, and it's important that you get the group dynamic down. Me and Jared were the jocks of the group, a pair of gym rats who were constantly on the grind for the perfect physique. Max was our resident cool guy, just a chill dude who liked to party and usually organized our little adventures. Raj was our brain, and most of us probably wouldn't have graduated without him. He was probably the smartest guy in the frat, and he'd helped a lot of us keep our GPAs up so we could keep our various grants and scholarships. We all had our parts to play, like the A-team, and each of us made up for some shortcoming in the group. Max had charted our course so that we could stop sometimes and spend our nights partying in different ports. Biloxi, Long Beach. Finally, we'd end up in New Orleans, where we'd turn the boat into the rental company and get a car back to our original dock so we could get our cars. It was a good plan, but Raj pointed out that his route took us through several large shipping lanes that would likely bring us close to larger shipping vessels, which, were the ones that used them. They'd probably capsize us if we got too close. Might be better to stick to the less busy waterways if we expect to get the deposit back on our rented houseboat. Max brushed it off. If we take these routes, we're better suited to stop in the party ports. Come on, Raj, live a little. Raj furrowed his brow, but he didn't argue. Roger McCormick, an underprofessor at the college that we graduated half a decade ago, might not be a risk taker, but Raj had learned long ago to roll with the punches when it came with us. It usually came out okay, and Raj enjoyed the adventure as much as the rest of us. We had been out about 3 days, preparing to stop in Gulfport and take on provisions before heading to New Orleans, when we saw something strange in the water. Well, not that strange, I guess. After all, it's not really uncommon to see a rubber duck in the water. It's kind of where they hang. Most of the time it's bathtubs or sinks, though, and not off the coast of Louisiana. I was manning the wheel, playing captain while Max went and took a break, and when I first saw it, I wasn't sure what I was looking at. I wouldn't have seen it at all if it wasn't fluorescent orange and riding a huge wave. It was just one at first, a single little guy bobbing on the waves and smiling happily, but as I watched, I saw more of them come up on a swell. They were ducks. Some of them with sunglasses, ducks with scarves, holiday ducks, ducks in all colors, and as they floated past, I laughed, thinking it was the funniest thing I'd ever seen. Hey guys, I called down to the others who were playing cards in the galley. Come check this out. Max popped up first, as if he expected trouble. When he saw our little escort of colorful plastic borders, however, he laughed too. It was hard not to. The sight of all those ducks bobbing on the surface was just so weird. It was almost a little too weird. What were these ducks doing out here anyway? The longer I watched them bobbing around, the more it made me kind of nervous as well. Where'd they all come from? Why were they suddenly all around us? It was easy to laugh at them if you didn't ask questions, but hard not to feel creeped out when you stopped to think about why they were here. "Why are there so many ducks out here?" asked Jared, watching them flow around the ship as they roiled in the dark water. "Well, it could be that they're testing ocean currents and swell patterns." Max had taken the wheel again, a large wave splashing against the bow and sending a few of the ducks onto the deck. He gave Raj a weird look, though. "What?" "Ocean current patterns. Sometimes oceanography institutes will release a bunch of rubber ducks and watch wave patterns and changes in tidal flow. They've got little trackers in them so they can plot their course, which helps them decipher currents and stuff." Jared picked up one of the ducks and squeezed it, eliciting a friendly squeak from the smiling toy. "Seems like it'd be bad for the environment. Wouldn't it lead to all kinds of environmental problems?" Raj furrowed his brow as Jared squeaked it again before tossing it into the water. He started picking them up and throwing them into the black soup, a few of them skipping across the surface before disappearing into the night. I realized we'd been a little farther from the coast than Max had meant for us to be, though I could still see it. The lights were far away and ethereal. "That is weird. The ones they usually use are made out of cork or something biodegradable. Even if they're rubber, they usually don't squeak." We watched them come rolling in as the waves got progressively higher. Something was stirring up the water not too far from us, and Max seemed to be steering us towards it. When I mentioned this, he said he just wanted to see what it was. His curiosity piqued. Might be a ship in distress or something. Maybe we could help him. He had some idea of being a big hero or something, but I wasn't sure that we could do anything if it was a big transport ship. They'd have a lot more people than our little boat could hold. A boat that sometimes felt a little full with 4 people on board. We cruised between a pair of buoys, heading into open water as we looked for the source of the turbulent water and the ducks. The rope color made it pretty clear that the area was dotted with reefs and sandbars, and the little islands that dotted the area made it even clearer that caution was required out here. It'd be real easy to come up on a sandbar and scrape our hull or blow our bottom out on a reef, and then we'd be floating on driftwood all the way to the rental agency to explain how we'd taken our boat somewhere unadvisable. We came up with a little inlet, the GPS telling us we were entering a major transport lane, and that was when we found the source of the ducks. Their transport ship had been massive, likely hauling all sorts of things. Most of it was sinking to the bottom of the ocean. The ship was in the process of joining its cargo, and as it capsized, it was sending up massive waves and tidal surges. The ducks were coming out of a container that had broken open, and as it slipped beneath the water, it spewed out the floating little knickknacks as they scattered on the surface, pushed by the waves. That should have been the scariest part, the sinking ship, but it couldn't hold a candle to the massive tentacles that were wrapping around the hull and dragging it under. They were hard to make out in the dark of the night, but their undersides were cream-colored and covered in suction cups. They were massive, rising into the air as they came slithering from the depths of the ocean. Even from our position, over 100 feet away, I didn't think any of us felt safe. We were on this creature's turf, bobbing on the surface of its hunting ground, and if it wanted us, there was nothing we could do about it. "We need to go," Raj whispered, as if he was afraid the thing could hear him. "We need to go while it's still mangling that ship." Max agreed, and as we pulled away as quietly as we could, the rest of us kept a close eye on those rising tentacles as they descended into the ocean with the remains of the cargo ship. As we came slowly through the reefs and the bars, we kept expecting to feel a tentacle latch around us and drag us down. The ducks just kept coming, the waves of colorful toys no longer as whimsical as they had been. We had been planning to anchor for the night around midnight, But when I sat up out of a stupor the next day and discovered we were pulling into New Orleans, it wasn't a surprise. None of us had said as much, but I think we were all feeling a little less than safe out here after what we'd seen the night before. The rental company told us they couldn't give us a refund for the days we hadn't used, but we told them that was fine. I didn't feel safe until my feet were on solid ground again, and I've never been happier to live in a landlocked state. We had fun with the rest of our trip, exploring the Big Easy and taking in the sights and smells of the city, and after a few nights of leisure, we started to wonder if it had all really happened. Maybe we'd just gotten spooked by all those rubber ducks after having a little too much to drink. Maybe we had a group hallucination. Maybe we just seen something shadowy out in the ocean and jumped to conclusions. 2 nights later, though, while drinking in a little hole-in-the-wall bar, we discovered that it hadn't been just drunken delusions. We were all laughing after our 3rd or 4th pitcher of beer when Raj suddenly sat up a little straighter and looked at one of the TVs behind the bar. He went over to it, asking the barman to turn it up, and as we followed behind him, we caught the tail end of a news report about a ship that had recently gone missing on its way to New Orleans. The story had a picture of a large cargo ship. A ship that we had all watched get drug into the water a few nights ago. And the news lady was talking about how it was a huge mystery for local sailors. The ship, nearly 100% automated except for a crew of 10, was lost at sea somewhere off the coast of Louisiana. While several cargo containers have been found off the coast as well, the ship itself has seemingly vanished. Residents in the area have been inundated with rubber ducks for the last few nights, and there's concern that the ship may have sunk and been pulled out by an errant current. They showed the footage of a massive amount of rubber ducks washing up on the beach near Long Beach. Watching those ducks go in and out with the waves made me anxious in a way I couldn't explain, but didn't need to. It was pretty clear that everyone here was feeling the same, and when the newscaster moved on to another story, we ordered another pitcher and returned to our table. The festivities were definitely a little muted after that, and it was decided that boating was right out for our future trips. I think maybe we'll go to Vegas next year. Vegas sounds nice, especially after what we saw. Terry was walking past his parents' room when he heard his mother's frustrated exclamation. "I can't believe I have to work all Easter weekend," she bemoaned, sitting on the bed as she tried to stop her tears. His father was shaving in the bathroom and looked like he was only half listening. Terry thought she had probably gotten off easy, since now Dad was going to have to handle Easter by himself. He would have to color the eggs, make the Rice Krispie bunnies, hide the eggs, sneak out the baskets at night, and generally take care of Terry and his sister. His parents would have likely been a little sad to know that at 10, their son no longer believed in these things. Had, in fact, peeked while his mother set the baskets out last year. But he wasn't breathing a word of it to Laura, so she'd still be excited about the coming of the bunny. "The kids will be sad to not see you Sunday morning," his father commented, wincing as the razor nicked him. One look at Mom told Terry that that was the wrong thing to have said. "Thanks, Randy, 'cause I don't feel bad enough as it is. I'm looking at working 16 to 15 hours a day for the next 3 days, and you throw something like that at me." His dad held toilet paper to the cut, but Terry thought the wound he had dealt his mother might be worse. I didn't mean anything by it," he corrected, finishing up with the shaving cream on the left side of his face. "It was just—" "Well, don't worry then," she said, getting up and turning for the door. "I'll just sleep in the guest room after I get done dragging myself in so I won't disturb you. I wouldn't want you to miss any sleep so you're fresh to deal with the kids all weekend." When his dad commented that that wasn't fair, he set off a shouting match that lasted for the better part of 30 minutes. Terry had seen his parents fight before. Their arguments were something that were starting to become more frequent as of late, and Terry thought it might be because they never saw each other. His mother worked long hours at her job, and his father worked opposite her, making more money than she could from breaking her back, as she often said. They tried to hide these fights from him and Laura, but both had heard them and knew better than to get involved. So, when his mother slapped his father hard enough to rock his head to the side, it surprised her as much as it did Terry. She stood like a statue for a pregnant moment, the two of them caught in tableau, both too afraid to move lest their marriage just shatter like a soap bubble. I have to go to work, she stuttered, grabbing her coat from the bed as she walked to the door. Terry scuttled away, but he saw her shadow as she stopped in the door like she meant to say something else. She left instead, her slip-safe shoes making a crink noise on the floor as she walked. Terry just stood there, unsure of what to do now, afraid to move, lest she should hear him and turn around. But when the door closed in the living room, he knew she was gone. He still couldn't bring himself to move just yet, not sure what to make of this new development. He had heard them fight, but never liked this before. He peeked back through the door and saw his father, looking at the mark in the mirror. He was trying to be stoic, but to Terry, it looked like he was having trouble figuring out what that slap had meant. Terry trotted down the hall while his dad was distracted, wanting to be in the living room with Laura when he finally came to check on them. She was watching Paw Patrol on the couch, but it didn't really look like she was paying attention. She glanced up when Terry sat next to her, and he could tell that she'd been listening. She was 4, but she already knew well to listen when her parents fought. It was how you could tell if Mom was going to come into the living room to play with you, or if she was going to sit in her room and cry. It was how you could tell if Dad might want to throw the ball around, or if he was likely to growl at you to go play somewhere else. "I'm tired of this," Terry said, turning to look at the TV as he watched the pups save a bunch of ducks. "Me too," Laura said, not even having to ask. "I don't want Mommy and Daddy to leave, but I hate when they fight. Sometimes I wish they would leave," Terry said, and Laura looked at him as she covered her mouth with her hands. "Don't say that, Terry. Who would take care of us?" "I don't know," he growled, feeling her sweaty hand slip into his, "but anyone would be better than them fighting all the time." They sat in silence for a while as the show went off and something else came on. Terry wasn't really paying attention to it anyway. He had learned early in life that when you were watching TV, nothing else really seemed important. You could ignore your parents fighting, your sister crying as your mom cried from the next room, your dad as he tried to talk softly to Grandma on the phone about how bad the last fight had been and how much he wondered how long they could go on. Dad wandered in somewhere between shows and told them that lunch would be in a little while, asked if they had picked up their toys beforehand. Both went about it mechanically, throwing their toys into the box as they tidied up. Terry thought a lot about that fight that day, and it followed him like a ghost as he tried his best to outrun it. He thought about the way that she had accused his dad of not wanting the kids as he put his toys away. He thought about the way Dad had accused Mom of only wanting to work all the time as he ate his PB&J. He thought about the sound of that slap as he tried to concentrate on a video game or a comic book, and they chased him like a dog chases its tail all day long. He was still thinking about it when he went to bed that night, and when Dad turned off the light and told him that he loved him, he found his eyes weren't nearly tired enough to send him off to dreamland. He lay there in the dark, letting it pool around him as the moon sent runners of light in through the window. He was still awake when his mom came home, and he heard her look in on his father before going to the guest room and closing herself off. Terry closed his eyes, trying to seal in the hot tears that threatened to come leaking out. 10 was too young to realize that your comfortable life might be coming to an end. He shouldn't have such thoughts, but he'd watched Bobby Fitzroy go through it the year before. Now Bobby lived with his dad in New Mexico half the year, and his mom down the street the other half. Terry saw him at school still, most of the time, but he looked angry and confused. Bobby looked like he wasn't sure where he was a lot of the time, and he'd started getting into fights more often. Terry didn't want that for him or Laura, and as he tried to stop the tears, he heard himself whisper the words of a prayer or a curse. "Take them away. Take them away before they can hurt us. I don't care who's going to take care of us, but I don't want them to share us. Please, 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 don't make me choose between them. I just want the fighting to stop." He drifted off as a light rain began to fall outside, a soft sound beneath it that, to his ears, sounded like hopping. Laura woke him up in the morning, shaking him so violently that he thought someone was attacking him. "Terry! Terry, wake up! Mom and Dad are gone!" Terry came groggily awake, still half in the dream that had held him all night. He was sitting in bed, watching the light stream under his bedroom door, broken only by something that came thumping up and down the hallway. It seemed to shake the house with each loud thump, and the longer he watched, the more curious he became. He'd gotten out of bed, but each step towards the door seemed to stretch his room like a funhouse. The door was suddenly miles away, and as he moved closer, he watched that thumping creature move back and forth in front of it. Just as he finally reached the door, it stopped in front of it and seemed to stare at him, as much as a shadow could stare. Its long black shade fell across him, and as the door came open, he was blinded by the light on the other side. Just as something began to materialize, Laura had started shaking him, and he'd never seen what it was. What'd you say?" he said, rubbing at his eyes, not sure if he had heard her correctly. "Mom and Dad are gone. The room is empty, and I can't find them." She was still in her PJs, and her hair was a puffy cloud hanging around her head. She was crying, and Terry could tell that she'd been up for a little bit. He wasn't too worried, though. Mom and Dad sometimes left them alone, but they usually left a note or something to explain. The more awake he came, the more Terry just assumed they had forgotten to get Easter stuff and just went out to pick some up while they were asleep. Maybe, he dared to think, they had gone to talk about what had happened yesterday, too. Did they leave a note? They probably just went out to buy Easter stuff for us. "I don't know. I woke up and there was a noise in the living room. I'm really scared, Terry. Someone put decorations up in the hall, and I could see something big moving around in the living room. Come with me to check. I don't want to go alone." Terry sighed and climbed out of bed. Laura got like this sometimes, and until he proved to her that there was no boogeyman waiting to snatch her up, she wouldn't leave him alone. Best thing to do was get up and prove to her that there was nothing to be afraid of, so he could go back to bed until his parents got home. They never went anywhere together. They never seemed to do anything together other than sleep. So if they were both gone, he still held out hope that maybe they were talking things out. When he stepped out into the hallway, however, Terry thought something else might be going on. The walls were covered in Easter decorations. Crepe paper yellow chicks, cotton ball bunnies, yellow suns, multicolored Easter eggs, they were all stuck up to every surface and seemed to glare down at him, even with the hallway lights off. The only light he could see, in fact, was the warm, welcoming glow of the living room. As they watched, something did seem to be moving around in there, and Terry felt cold dread with every step he took. The sound of it moving reminded him of his dream. It was like hearing an adult hop around on all fours, and it was not an altogether comforting sound. As they came into the living room, Terry saw the decorations were in here as well. They made the living room look strange. The furniture looked similar, just like a lot of his friends' living rooms looked similar to his. But the canary yellow walls had been completely covered in decorations. They covered the windows and the door in the technicolored vibrance of a Lisa Frank notebook. And on the TV stand, where the old 30-inch TV sat, were a pair of baskets and a note that looked like someone had written it in crayon across the virgin poster board. "Happy Easter, Laura and Terry. We have a wonderful Easter egg hunt for you. Find 5 Easter eggs and then come to the kitchen for a lovely Easter breakfast," it said. Terry was hesitant. If his parents had planned this, then it was way out of left field. Laura, however, was delighted. Her earlier fears vanished, and she laughed as she grabbed the pink and green basket that was clearly meant for her. Terry reached for his own, and as he looked around, he could see plastic eggs hiding everywhere. Hiding was a bit of a stretch, he supposed. Some were hidden, but others were just tossed about, helter-skelter, as if a much younger child might be seeking them. "Come on, Terry! We only need 5 eggs!" They had their eggs quickly, the living room fairly bursting with them. and as they came to the kitchen, Terry found the source of the galumping noise. Seated at the table, its painted eyes smiling placidly, was someone who could only be his father in a large and intricate rabbit suit. The legs were so comically big that you would have to hop in order to move, and the body was clothed in a vest of many pastel colors. A pair of large buck teeth graced the face, and one ear hung jauntily at a crooked angle. At the stove was someone in a much more normal-sized chicken suit, the dimensions more suited for moving. They were cooking and clucking happily, and Terry could smell pancakes and butter as he and his sister approached the rabbit man. Laura was hesitant, but her smile made Terry think that she was still enchanted by the whole thing. "Congratulations, my little peeps," the rabbit man said, throwing his arms wide in excitement. "You've passed the first test. I hope you're ready for some breakfast." As he said it, a group of smaller chicks came bustling out, holding plates up so their mother could put pancakes on them. They all seemed to balk and cluck like real chickens as they bustled about, and as Terry and his sister sat down, they brought them large pancakes with jelly beans baked into them, a glass of soda and chocolate milk to wash it down with as well. Both the kids set to covering their cakes in syrup and laid in with relish as they scarfed down the tasty treat. As they ate, the chicks left, but the chicken and the rabbit seemed to watch them with interest. Terry found it a little off-putting, but he supposed it was the idea of having someone in a costume that interested in you. He was still pretty sure that this was just his mom and dad putting on for them. Maybe this was some of their cousins that acted as the chicks, and he felt only a little embarrassed by all of it. Terry was a little too old for all this, at least he felt so, but he could appreciate the effort that had gone into it. Maybe this was their way of making up for all the fighting lately. If so, Terry wasn't about to ruin this for Laura, who was probably certain that this was the Easter Bunny and his helpers. "So," said the bunny, bringing his gloved hands together, "are you ready for the next egg hunt?" "Yeah," Laura said, practically vibrating with all the sugar. "It's very simple," the rabbit man said. "Go collect 10 eggs each and get a wonderful prize." Laura hooted and was off like a shot, but Terry stayed for a moment. "So what's the prize?" he asked. "Are you guys giving us our baskets early or something?" The bunny man cocked his head a little, and the chicken made a low little cluck sound as she folded her hands in front of her. "Why, you've already got your basket, silly. If you want your next surprise, you better go find those eggs before your sister gets them all." Terry rolled his eyes. "Whatever you say, Mr. Easter Bunny," and went off to find some eggs. The second egg hunt took next to no time as well, but Terry discovered something strange when he left the living room to search the few other rooms in the house. Their 2-bedroom, 1-bath was full of plastic eggs. The bathroom, his sister's room, his parents' room, the living room, the coat closet, even his room had some eggs in it. He found 5 in the hallway, 5 more in the bathroom, but it appeared that he had taken his time. His sister was already biting the head off a large chocolate bunny when he came back to the kitchen. The Easter Bunny was looking on with frozen joy, but the chicken was gone. Terry figured his mother had needed to go to work, and it would just be them and the father rabbit for a while. Terry brought his eggs back and was presented with a large chocolate rabbit of his own. He hardly needed the sugar, but he found that he was wrapped up in the spirit of the season now, so he took a bite. After that, the day progressed in much the same way. They ate candy, they hunted eggs, and when lunch rolled around, the chicken and her chicks served them a lunch which turned out to be some kind of hamburger made out of gummy bear material with circus peanut buns. They hunted eggs all afternoon, winning chocolates and stuffed animals and other little trinkets. As they sat on the couch watching the Easter bunnies coming to town, Laura snuggled against her older brother as she tried to stay awake. Terry was trying to concentrate on the TV, but he felt like something was watching him. The prickling hairs on the back of his neck were tingling, and as he glanced around, he saw something large lean back into the kitchen. Their dad hadn't broken character all day, Mom either, and though Terry applauded their efforts, he was ready for some normalcy. Surely they wouldn't keep this up all weekend, would they? His mom would have to go back to work. Dad would have to go back to work. This was fun. It was the first day in a long time that his parents hadn't spent the day fighting. but Terry knew that tomorrow it would probably go back to business as usual. As he drifted off, he felt the shadow of the rabbit fall over him again, and shuddered as he remembered the dream from the night before. He woke up in his bed the next day, Laura shaking him awake again. "Terry! Terry!" "What, Laura? I want to sleep. I'm tired." He rolled over, pulling the covers over him as he slid his head beneath the pillow. He felt something small and plastic press against his cheek, and opened his eyes to find a fluorescent orange egg nestled beneath the pillow. "Okay, but you'll miss the egg hunt for breakfast," she said shyly, running out of the room as he sat up in bed. He could already see a few of the eggs hidden in his room, and a smile stretched his face as he grabbed for his basket. It seemed they were having another day of egg hunts. Their father was waiting for them in the kitchen, Mom in her hen costume cooking at the stove, and when he held his hands out, Laura dumped 5 eggs into the floppy mittens that covered them. "Great job, dear," he said, pulling a giggling Laura into a hug. "Mother hen, Laura would like her breakfast now." The hen bacocked loudly and set a plate down in front of Laura with scrambled eggs and bacon. Laura looked a little disappointed before biting into them and finding they were gummy bacon and eggs. The rabbit looked at Terry as he came stumbling into the kitchen, wiping sleep from his eyes and taking in the strange scene. His sister was laughing as she stretched the bacon like taffy, scarfing it down with gusto. Terry started to sit, but the rabbit man opened his hands, flapping them a little as if he expected payment. "Right," Terry said. "How many is it this morning?" "Only 5, the rabbit said cheerily, and Terry put his head back in the living room and quickly snapped up 5 of the plastic eggs. After he handed them to his father, he was rewarded with his own plate of gummy breakfast. "Not to ruin your theme here, Dad, but could I get some real eggs?" He heard the pan crash against the stove and turned to see Mother Hen glowering at him through the eye holes of her mask. Even through those painted-on happy eyes, Terry felt like he could feel the coals of her rage. Was she that committed to the role? "My bad, Mom. I didn't mean to insult you," he said, turning to eat. The Easter Bunny was giving her an equally hollow look, but turned back to Terry with his frozen regard. "Eat up, kids. We have another fun day of egg hunts ahead. We might even dye some eggs and make some crafts. Won't that be fun?" "Yeah!" Laura cried, gobbling up the rest of her breakfast. Terry agreed, leaning in and wondering how long this was going to go. They sat on the couch again that night, watching something called The Easter Chick. They had made masks after breakfast, both of them looking like chick faces made out of Easter grass and papier-mâché. Laura had worn hers all day, looking like a clucking hen as she went about her Easter egg hunting. She punctuated each loud squawk with a giggle, and the Easter Bunny seemed to like her enthusiasm. Terry, on the other hand, was glad they would only really be able to do this for one more day. Tomorrow would be Sunday, and Terry expected that after tomorrow, things would go back to normal. The egg hunts were fun, but they had needed 30 eggs to get dinner. Terry had been afraid that they couldn't find 60 eggs between them, but they had managed it after he remembered the one under his pillow and found a few more in his room. They'd been hunting eggs all day, and the longer it went on, the less certain Terry was that his father was in that costume. He had felt the rabbit man watching him on multiple occasions, peeking from doorways and skulking in the shadows, and it just didn't seem like the kind of thing his dad would do. Except for at meals, the chicken woman and her chicks were nowhere to be seen, and Terry wondered where they were going. They had to be disappearing through the back door, because they certainly weren't going out the front. Terry glanced at the window, still covered in decorations, and began to doubt that there was anything there but more wall. There had always been a window there. He knew that, but he was doubtful that there was a window or a door in the living room anymore. The movie went off, and the living room was bathed in the murky credit screen. Terry could feel the rabbit man watching him, the shadows from the kitchen not quite deep enough to hide him completely. He had been watching them for hours, and Terry prayed internally that he was dreaming. This wasn't real. His mind was playing tricks on him. He was being silly. Of course it was his mom and dad. Who else would be doing this? He yawned, but he shook his head. He didn't want to fall asleep. Then he'd wake up in his bed, and things like this would go on forever and ever. No, it'd be over tomorrow. His dad would wake them up Monday morning and ask how they had liked having the Easter Bunny over all weekend. He would wear that big old grin he always wore when he asked what Santa had brought them, and Terry would know that it had been him the whole time. As he tried to make his mind believe this, he must have dozed off, because the next thing he knew, it was morning again. Terry woke up the next morning, but not with Laura shaking him awake. He woke up to the sound of Laura's frantic footsteps as she ran around the house. Terry's stomach grumbled, letting him know that it was later than he had thought it was. When he rolled out of bed, his feet came down on a plastic egg, and he saw that there were more of them in the floor. He scooped a few of them up and headed for the kitchen. As he came into the hallway, his sister nearly knocked him over as she hunted for eggs. She was wearing the mask still, her giggling gone as she moved about frantically. She was counting to herself, clearly thinking of eggs, and Terry shook his head as he moved towards the kitchen. The Easter Bunny and Mother Hen were still there, and the bunny spread his arms wide as he trumpeted, "Happy Easter!" He was humming "Here Comes Peter Cottontail" as Terry put the 10 eggs into his arms. The rabbit froze, seeming to count them with his skin, before dropping them onto the floor when some of them broke open to let their jelly beans spill out. "Oh dear, someone didn't read the note. It's 30 eggs for your special Easter breakfast, kiddo." Terry gasped, though it was twinged with cynicism. "Come on, Dad, this has gone a little far. I'm hungry. I want food." The rabbit sat staring at him, his frozen face now seeming more sinister than jolly. "Sorry, kiddo, I'm the Easter Bunny, not your dad. If you want your breakfast, it's 30 Easter eggs. It's a good one, too. Don't you want it?" Enough. This was fun at first, but it's becoming too much. I'm too old for this stuff anyway. Laura may like this, but I just want some. But he had reached for the stuffed rabbit head, and the hand that grabbed him was strong and thick and painful. "Oh dear, pal. Looks like somebody wants to be a party pooper. No breakfast for you until you get your 30 eggs. Now scoot, kiddo." The voice never rose, never became mean or monstrous. But when he flung Terry out of the kitchen, Terry realized that the guy in the suit couldn't possibly be his dad. He tossed him effortlessly with one arm, and when Terry hit the wall outside the kitchen door, he saw stars. The rabbit man just sat there after he'd returned his arm to the arm of the chair, his placid face grinning like a specter at the fallen boy. Laura came bustling in then, the front of her Easter dress stuffed with eggs. She upturned her bucket, spilling eggs across the floor, and then dumped the front of her dress and let her bounty cascade into the Easter Bunny's lap. There must have been 60 eggs there, maybe more, and as the rabbit clapped his hands together, he reached behind the chair and took out a box that Terry was pretty sure hadn't been there before. Laura reached for it, her hands shaking as she held up the intricately wrapped package, and Terry heard her squeal as she pulled out a pair of onesie pajamas that looked like a chicken's body, minus the head, of course. The shadow of the mother hen fell over him, and when she pushed the door closed, Terry was left hurting as he leaned against the wall. For a split second, Terry thought about looking for some eggs. His stomach was grumbling, and he wanted something to eat, but he knew it would be more sugar and candy. They'd eaten nothing but sweets for 2 days, and Terry's stomach wasn't just grumbling for lack of food. He'd felt ready to throw up after dinner last night. Swedish fish the size of a carp in some kind of sugar sauce, and his body was crying out for real food. Instead of looking for eggs, Terry decided to limp back to his room and see if there was any food there. After a half an hour of looking, he discovered that the beef jerky and the sunflower seeds and even the Christmas popcorn bucket that his grandmother had gotten for him were gone. That seemed to lend more credence to the idea that this wasn't his house. but how could it be anywhere else? Something bounced off his closed door hard enough to rattle it, and Terry had just enough time and energy to throw his body against it before something battered it like a cannonball. It bounced off the frame, Terry pushing continuously as whatever it was tried to get in. He yelled at it to go away, told it to stop, but it just kept pummeling his door until it finally dropped against the wood, panting heavily. Terry wanted to see what it was, wanted to know what was happening out there, but instead he locked the door and shoved his desk against it. A plastic egg fell out from behind the desk, and as it broke open, Terry saw the jelly beans glistening on the floor. He was just so hungry, just hungry enough that even the sugary beans looked tasty as he wolfed them down greedily. He laid eyes on another, and suddenly he could see the fluorescent colors everywhere in his small room. He wanted to gut them and devour every last morsel, but something told him not to. They might have to last him for a little while, he reminded himself, taking them and dumping them on the desk, trying to see what kind of resources he had available. Turned out, the beans lasted for 2 days. No new eggs appeared, and Terry ate the beans sparingly as he tried to devise some plan to get out of here. If the front door was gone, he would only know after he tore down some of the decorations. What would the Easter Bunny and the mother hen do if he started doing that? Would they stop him? Would they hurt him? The bump on the back of his head proved that they would hurt him. But how much? And what was all this? Why was he here? How had he gotten here? Surely this hadn't been because of his stupid Easter wish. He worried about Laura, too. God only knew what was happening to her. He still heard her running up and down the halls as she searched for eggs. Sometimes he wondered if she was the one banging on his door. It happened a few more times, the banging less frantic than the first time, and sometimes he imagined that he heard some weird clucking as whatever it was battered the door. Mother hen, maybe? Terry didn't know, but he knew one thing for sure. Whether the food ran out or not, he would need water. On the second day, he devised a plan to get to the bathroom and get back to his room. He would creep out after Laura went to sleep, something she seemed to do after a set amount of time. Whatever was going on out there, his sister still slept. And that would give him an opportunity to get water and maybe some food. He would check to see if the rabbit man slept too, and if he did, maybe he could sneak some food from the kitchen. It was a long shot, but it was all he had. After he heard nothing from the house for what he judged to be about an hour, Terry shoved the desk out of his way and peeked into the hallway. It was dark, the only light coming from the living room, as the TV showed nothing but snow. Whatever tonight's feature presentation had been, it was over now. Terry crept like a ghost from his bedroom and made his way down the hallway. His throat was dry, his belly grumbling, but he made himself be quiet. If the rabbit man or the chicken woman or even Laura caught him, it would be very bad for him. Each step felt like 1,000 miles, and each step made him expect to be devoured by a large and angry beast as his foot came down on the carpet. When his foot struck something, he jumped back in surprise, but when it groaned in pain, he looked down to see that he had stumbled over the last thing he expected to find. It was one of the peeps, but it was lying on the floor, curled into a ball. It was shaking and groaning, and as he came a little closer, it turned its head and said his name. It lifted its wing and tried to touch its face, but it seemed to panic when it touched its throat and didn't find what it expected. It shook its head, saying his name again as it sobbed in pain and fear, and that's when Terry understood. It was Laura. They had turned his sister into one of them somehow. Terry didn't remember crying, but when Laura lifted a wing up to his face, he saw tears on her feathers. He pulled her to him, wanting to comfort her to be sure, but he didn't know how. This was all his fault. He just wanted something better than his parents always fighting and his sister always scared. He He just wanted a family that loved each other. When he picked her up, he found her surprisingly light. He took her to the living room, intending to discover if there was a door there or not. He laid her on the couch, Laura seeming to bask in the glow of the TV, as he went to work. The crate paper and construction paper came down in harsh gasps as Terry tore it. The walls were covered in them, thick as spiderweb, and as they came down, Terry felt almost hopeless, as only the walls greeted him. There was no door, no window, no escape from this place. Terry slammed his small fist against the wall in impotent rage. They had trapped him. The only way out was through the damned rabbit and his clucking wife. And Terry doubted that they could get past them, even if his sister was conscious. Even less so if he had to carry her. Lose something, kiddo? Terry spun in a blind panic, and there was the Easter Bunny. He looked different now, slightly smaller, and when he moved, Terry realized why. His legs moved like they should have, galumphing along like a rabbit's would. He was minus his vest, and his face was far too expressive for a normal creature. He looked like the costume he had worn, but he was just too real to be believed. He was like a prop in a movie, the most genuine thing Terry had ever seen. He held out his hand, and a delicate blue egg appeared. Even at 10, it was the most beautiful thing Terry had ever seen. It was Fabergé, looking painstakingly painted, and in the front was a little window. Inside the window, Terry could see a little house with little trees in the front yard. He didn't need a closer look to see that it was his house and guessed the egg's purpose. I was worried you had died in there, kiddo, and now you're trying to leave before the game's over. Not very sportsmanlike of you. Terry looked at the egg, wanting it more than anything in his entire life, but knowing he'd probably never have it. Let's play a game, then. You find one more egg, and you can go free. Find my special egg in 24 hours, and you can go. Fail, and you come with me. Terry took a step forward, wanting to simply snatch the egg, but as the rabbit closed his fist around it, Terry saw it was gone when he opened it again. Where's that? Where would you take me? Terry asked, not trusting the rabbit man for a second. Same place I take all the kids who wish for something better. You head home with me, join the peeps, lay the eggs I leave for kids who've earned them, and serve me for all time. Terry wanted to deny him, wanted to yell some of the unique swears the older kids used at school, but he knew that this might be his only chance. He was screwed either way, so what did it really matter? Deal, Terry said, and suddenly every light in the house came on, bathing the space in light. The Easter Bunny was gone, but Terry didn't need him anymore. It took him 2 hours to destroy the living room, but he found no egg. He ripped foam out of the couch, moving his sister to a pallet on the floor as he tore it to pieces. He smashed the TV. He tried to pull up the carpet before realizing the futility, and after 2 hours he had nothing to show for it but a torn fingernail and a dull throbbing in his hand. He went room to room, tearing everything to pieces as he looked for the egg. All the normal eggs were gone now, and Terry was glad that they weren't there to muddy the waters. He tore open his parents' mattress. He pulled the drawers out of their dresser. He ripped his sister's stuffed animals open. He tore his clothes from the closet and piled them on the floor. He smashed his fish tank and sifted through the rocks. He pulled everything out of both closets, but after hours of searching, he couldn't find it. He held back his tears with every room that passed, and as he looked into the bathroom, he knew it had to be here. He had left the rooms of the house in ruins, and this was the last place it could be. He tore every towel out of the towel closet, but no egg. He emptied the hamper, but no egg. He took the tank lid off the toilet, and when he found no egg, he broke it on the toilet, leaving it gushing water. Terry looked everywhere, but as it came to pass that there was still no egg, he fell to his knees and cried amidst the seeping water. He had failed. He couldn't find it. Now he and Laura would be trapped in the service of this Easter bunny, made to lay eggs and serve his food forever. His hands bled, his knees hurt, and as he cried, the tears stung the cuts on his cheek. Terry had wanted to go home. He just wanted this all to end. And when someone enveloped him in a hug, he flinched hard enough to knock himself into the wet floor. He looked up to see Laura standing over him, tears streaming down her eyes as she watched her big brother fall to pieces. "I'm sorry, Laura. I'm sorry. I can't save you. This is all my fault. I wished for this. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. But she put a wing against his mouth and shook her head. She reached out with her other, the wing still possessing some stubby fingers amidst the feathers, and held out the egg that he'd been searching for. Terry's jaw fell open. The bunny had hidden it in the one place he knew Terry would never look, with Laura. The knowledge made him feel small, but as he shook the egg, he heard something rattling inside of it. He tilted it so that the picture window was face down, and a large old-fashioned key fell into his palm. He took it back to the living room, looking at the blank wall again until he found what he was looking for, a keyhole in that perfectly flat wall. He put it in and twisted, the door opening onto the mirror of the living room he stood in, minus the utter ruin that Terry had created while on his last egg hunt. He reached back for Laura, but she took a step away and shook her head. "Come on," he said, not understanding. "We don't have to stay." Laura didn't seem capable of real speech, but she took her wings and tapped them on her chest, as if to emphasize that she couldn't go back like this. It doesn't matter. Mom and Dad will love you whatever you look like. Maybe you'll turn back if you come back. Come on, Laura. You've got to come back." Laura shook her strange head, still covered by the papier-mâché mask she had made. Terry wondered what she looked like beneath it, but having seen the peeps as they served them meals, he thought he might be able to guess. As she went back to the kitchen, he saw the mother hen put a protective arm around her, leading her into whatever lay beyond that room. She only looked back once, and Terry only waited until she was out of sight to step through the door. "I'll come back for you somehow," he whispered, before falling into his own living room and passing out from exhaustion and malnutrition. That was where his parents found him when they came home an hour later. They'd been searching for him for 4 days and had just come from a press conference where they begged the kidnappers to bring their children back. His mother had screamed when she'd found him lying there, and they had rushed him to the ER. He'd been unconscious for about a day, but when Terry came to, he had told them about what had happened. He could tell they didn't believe him, thinking he'd been drugged or was just traumatized, but the search continued for Laura for the next 2 years. Terry told them who had taken her, but no one seemed to think the actual Easter Bunny had kidnapped 2 kids and then just let one of them go. Time went on, and after a dozen or so therapists and psychologists told Terry that his mind had misremembered a tragic childhood event, he started to believe it himself. He tried his best to forget about Mother Hen, the Easter Bunny, and his poor lost sister, but his dreams brought him back to that weekend often. In the dreams, the Easter Bunny chased him through the house, a nightmarish maze of halls and corridors that only ended when the giant rabbit finally came down on top of him, crushing him flat. His wife became fairly used to her husband waking up crying in the night, but she tried her best to help him through it. Despite everyone assuring him that it had never happened, Terry kept the egg on his desk, a reminder of his lost sister. Terry was 32 the next time he thought about Laura. His daughters were opening their Easter baskets as Terry and Mary looked on with smiles. Terry had to bury a shudder as he watched them crack open plastic eggs, and he reminded himself that all that had been his mind trying to make a traumatic experience more palatable. Candace and Skylar were not he and Laura. They would never have to hunt eggs through a nightmare house as they slowly became chickens. That was a fantasy, and one that was over. Skylar looked confused for a moment, holding up a very white egg as she read something printed on it. "Daddy, who's Aunt Laura?" Terry's breath hung in his throat, but Candace cut off any answer that he might have given. "I got one too. I don't think I've ever met her." Terry came slowly towards them, reaching out to Skylar as he asked to see. Printed in black ink on the plastic egg, the insides full of Technicolor jelly beans that spilled out as he gripped it much too hard, was something that brought Terry to his knees. He spent the rest of Easter in the ER, after fainting over with the egg still in his hand, his girls all very worried about him. On the egg were the words, "Happy Easter from your Aunt Laura." Detective Lance pulled up in front of the farmhouse, marveling at the way the corn rattled in the fields. The corn was wrong, he could tell that right away, and Lance could honestly say that he had never seen corn look that way. The husks were brown, the corn inside turning black as it rotted on the stalk. He had been impressed by the amount of corn surrounding the farmhouse, acres of skeletal stalks that made the farmhouse feel like an island in a dead corn sea. The police cars out front looked out of place in the dirt yard, and as he mounted the stairs, one of the rural cops came out to meet him. Lance was on loan from the nearby precinct, and the clock was ticking. He had about 36 hours to find anything that would lead them to 5 missing people. They needed his help in discovering what might have happened to the Murphy clan. "Bring me up to speed," he said, nodding at the man as he came onto the porch. He looked like any other state trooper, his coat trimmed in fur, his hat leaning into something more cowboy than law enforcement. He tugged a pack of smokes out of his pocket and lit one, the smoke curling up against the rafters of the porch as he assessed the big city detective they had called to help. Whatever he saw, he seemed unimpressed, and his smile was more than a little mocking. "Well, well, by all means, sir, let me fill you in on what us bumpkins have managed to turn up." He flipped open a spiral notebook and started flipping through the crumpled pages. Lance didn't much care for his tone, but he held his tongue as the trooper flipped through the notes. The county Mounties had been working the case for about a week, and had no idea what had become of the small farm family. The report said that the Murphys, 2 adults and 3 children, had suddenly vanished from their large farm. They'd also disappeared right around harvest time, leaving their cash crop in the ground. This made their sudden vanishing act all the more confusing, and Lance was eager to get his teeth in this one. Let's see. On October 23rd, their closest neighbor noticed the crops in the field had changed. They said it appeared that frost had killed all their corn overnight and just left it to rot. This was at odds since it had never gotten below 50 degrees on any given night recently. They came to check on the family and noticed that they were gone. Last time anyone could remember seeing them was on the 12th when they came into town to buy pumpkins for the kids. The children were out of school for the harvest, and they were getting ready to bring in the corn when they suddenly vanished. That's all we know, and that's why we called you in. I think the sheriff hopes a fresh set of eyes will prove useful. Have you found anything inside? No blood or bodies, if that's what you mean. We've found nothing to make us consider foul play, and no signs of robbery either. There's no reason at all that they should have left their house, and their vehicles are still there too. So, unless they walked out on foot with a kid under 3 and 2 under 18, we have to assume that they were abducted for some reason. Lance nodded, thinking over what they knew and adding it to the small amount that he assumed. With kids present, there was a pretty good chance that it had been a kidnapping. This was the Midwest, and it wasn't uncommon to have a whole family get picked up by traffickers, or worse. The location of the farm would mean that it would make it easy for them to disappear without notice. All the corn would mean that their crime scene would go unnoticed, even if they tried to run. They would likely never find the Murphys, not alive anyway, but Lance had to try. He was one of the department's best detectives, and he had a lot to live up to. Show me the house. Let's see what I can find. All right, but we've pretty much gone over this whole place with a fine-tooth comb. I'm not sure there's much else to find. After an hour and a half of searching the scene, Lance feared he might have been right. The farmhouse had 3 rooms. One was clearly a bedroom. The other one was a big room for the kids. The third was a big open room containing a kitchen, a living room, and a sitting room. The home was pristine, recently clean and freshly swept, and everything looked far too orderly for a kidnapping scene. The dishes were done. There were clothes laid out for the next day. There was no sign of a struggle or a fight, and Lance couldn't figure out how they had been taken so neatly. He was searching the kids' room, looking for anything, when he came across the journal. It was nothing, just a salt and pepper mead notebook left on the floor as if it were a tent for natives. It was the most out-of-place thing in the house, and it stood out to Lance for some reason. He couldn't have said why, but his eyes tracked back to that book no matter where he was in the room. As he left, he scooped it up and took it with him as he went back to the living room. Lance opened to the page it had been left on as he walked up the hall, reading what appeared to be an entry for October 10th. "Daddy's mad. Someone keeps stealing our scarecrows. They just disappear out of the field, and Daddy's getting pretty upset about it. He's certain that Dale is stealing them, but Dale swears it isn't him. Scarecrows are pretty heavy, so I'm not sure how he could steal them by himself. The field looks so empty without them. It's just corn as far as the eye can see. Sometimes I stand on the porch and just watch it wave in the breeze, hearing it rustle as the stalks chuckle together. It used to be comforting, but it's a little creepy lately. The rustling makes me think of a monster moving in the corn, and I've spent less time in the corn by myself. Hopefully, whoever's stealing our scarecrows will get caught. That way Daddy won't be so mad all the time." It was signed, Register Murphy. Register Murphy had been the middle child, Lance remembered, as he flipped to the next page. He was supposed to be about 8, and by his writing, Lance could believe it. It read like a typical child's journal, but Lance found himself intrigued all the same. If the kid had seen something, maybe he'd written about it in the journal. Something like that could help him narrow down the culprit or even a motive. Lance furrowed his brow and turned to the next page. There was indeed a visitor, but it wasn't the one that Lance had expected. October 11th. There was a surprise in the field this morning. Daddy was standing on the porch this morning when we came out to work, and he was scratching his head as he looked into the east field. Standing on a brand new post, its body turning rapidly, was a brand new scarecrow. It was dressed in a dark blue suit, a tall top hat on its round head, and the head was a small orange pumpkin. I thought maybe he was turning in the breeze, but then I realized that there wasn't any wind. The corn was still, and the usual rattle was gone. The scarecrow just kind of moved on its own. It danced something smooth and graceful. His arms were boneless, his legs kicking freely, and as the post wiggled around, he continued to dance and sway. I thought Daddy would be mad, but he seemed pretty happy about the scarecrow. He thinks it's funny, a dancing scarecrow, and he says it'll bring luck to our crops. His mother told him a story about a dancing scarecrow that brought rain and grew the corn 30 feet high. As he told it to us, I could see that it meant a lot to him, and he thought it was a big honor to have a dancing scarecrow in one of our fields. We were farming in the field he was in that day, and I couldn't help but watch him as he danced and swayed. Daddy seemed real happy, smiling every time he looked at the thing, but I was a little creeped out by it. I was working close to it, and I couldn't help but notice when it turned its head to look at me. The greasy face was far too lifelike, and it seemed to linger on me every time it got close. We brought in the corn, but I dreamed about that dancing scarecrow last night. It was dancing right in front of me, its mouth screaming as it twisted. Its dance became more and more violent, straw flying as it flailed around. Its screams started sounding like laughter, and as it fixed its eyes on me, it started to whisper, "He comes! He comes! He comes!" Who is this person he's talking about? What'll happen when he comes? Register Murphy. A dancing scarecrow? What the hell was that? Lance wondered. Had the kidnappers been dressed as scarecrows or something? There was no way that one person had kidnapped 5 people and spirited them away with no one noticing. Lance turned the page and read the next entry, seeing a pattern as the young boy laid out the days before his disappearance. The more he read, the less childish it sounded. The longer he read, the more it sounded like Register Murphy was detailing the worst days of his life. October 12th. There are 2 of them now. The new one is dressed in a yellow suit with a matching hat, and despite looking brand new, it looks like it was colored with pee-pee. They stand side by side in the fields, kicking their legs and swinging their arms, looking like they're trapped in a windstorm. Daddy clapped when he saw them, saying that this was exactly what he wanted. The story said that more scarecrows would show up, and I almost shook when he said it. More scarecrows? How many more? There were 2, kicking and dancing, smiling their greasy grins as they wiggled around. I was working alone in the east field today, picking the fields as far from the scarecrows as I could, when I heard them whispering. They were talking, just like they had in my dream, whispering about coming or whoever he was. I heard the corn rustle as it came over in the row next to me, and suddenly there they were, both of them dancing, spinning in the air like typhoons, and I could hear them whispering and screaming all around me. I covered my ears as they swirled, and when Dale found me crying, they were both gone. As I lay in bed that night, I heard them rustling amongst the corn plants, their bodies lashing wildly against the corn stalks, and the sound they made my skin crawl. October 13th. Daddy's gotten weird. When I came out to work today, he was talking to the scarecrows. There are 3 of them now, one of them in a blue suit, one in a yellow suit, and the newest one in a gray suit with a matching top hat. They were all side by side in the east field, dancing and swaying as they held Daddy with their black eyes. They seemed to be gently swaying, not the usual violent dancing they do, and they almost seemed to be listening to him. Listening or talking. He didn't help us today. We all went to work in the fields, picking corn and packing produce, but Daddy stayed with the scarecrows. He looked strange out in the field in his sleeveless t-shirt and his sleep pants, and when Mama went to go talk to him, he told her to go back inside. We were all on the porch carving pumpkins when she came back. Even Thomas was hacking away at his pumpkin's face with a butter knife, and Mama looked scared. She said that Daddy just wasn't feeling well, and when all the pumpkins were lit, he was still standing out there in the dark, talking with those scarecrows. I heard them out there dancing again last night, but I never heard Daddy come back inside. Register Murphy. Lance flipped back and read the last bit again. His dad, Marcus Murphy, was acting strangely. That could explain why his family had suddenly just up and disappeared. Maybe whoever these scarecrows were, they had help from the father. It was too soon to tell, but it was a working theory. That would explain why the vehicles that the family owned were still here. If the people running those scarecrows had their own vehicles, they could have disappeared easily without a trace. He kept reading, wanting more information, hoping for some other clue as to what had happened. October 14th. Daddy was still in the field, and so was a new scarecrow. He was in a green suit, and it looked like it was woven out of grass. All their heads are pumpkins, but unlike ours, they don't look squashy or attract flies. They just sit up there and smile and stare and look real creepy. Mama's worried about Daddy. All she does is sit at the window and watch him while he's in the field. He just stays in the field for some reason, listening to the scarecrows and talking with them. He moved around the cornfield sometimes, not picking or boxing, but just walking around aimlessly. Dale and I have been doing most of the work, but sometimes I can see the scarecrows following me. I felt like they might get me when it was just the 2 of them, but now there are 4, and it feels like they might trap me out there. They grin at me from out of the corn, watching me work, and when I try to tell Dale about it, he just tells me to stop being a spaz. Last night they were all over the field, and I had to put my head under the pillow to stop from hearing them. They sound scary, and their whispers are even louder now. They say he's coming, and that he's gonna get us. I don't know who he is, but I don't want him to get me. If he's as scary as the scarecrows are, I don't want him anywhere near the house. October 15th. Daddy's gone, but there's a new scarecrow out there now. This one's dressed in orange, and it matches the pumpkin he wears as a head. Mama told us to stay inside and went to go look for Daddy in the field. She couldn't find him out there and told us all to stay inside today. It started to drizzle a little, and while Thomas watched TV and Dale read, I sat by the window and watched the scarecrows. There are 5 of them now, and each of them are dancing just like the others. The rain doesn't hurt their spirits at all. They sit out in the rain and dance and sway on their posts, rustling the corn and sending streams of water flying off when they crash against them. It's weird, I wouldn't swear to it, but they look closer to the house somehow. Like when Daddy stood out there talking to them, they seemed farther from the house. Now I can see the rain as it slides off their faces. They're not on the porch, but it feels like they're close enough to throw a rock through the window if they wanted to. Thomas doesn't like them much. He came to sit with me and he said they were scary. He says they came and looked in his window at night, and he always hides and cries until they go away. I never checked to see if they came to my window. Maybe tonight I'll stay up a little and wait to see. This was looking more and more like a case of psychosis. The father had a break from reality and had done something to his family. Whatever this dancing scarecrow nonsense was didn't matter. It was pretty clear that something was going on with Marcus Murphy. Something tickled at the back of his mind as he read, though, and Lance couldn't help but think about something a friend had been telling him about. The scarecrows, the constant use of he, reminded him of Stephen's case. He shook it off, though, not wanting to muddy the waters with a different case. He called over one of the officers and asked if they could see if the family vehicles were all accounted for. He wanted them to check into places on the property where bodies could be hidden, like a well or an old drainage line or something. He suspected that the bodies had been easy for Marcus to move after they were dead, and wanted to know if there was anywhere on the property that they had found blood. "Nowhere, sir. There's not even a slaughterhouse. Marcus grew corn for the ethanol plant. Corn's pretty much his only crop. A lot of farmers out here grow mostly corn, and Marcus used every acre he had for his corn crop." Lance nodded. "What about a basement? Somewhere he might have taken them to kill them?" "No basement. Barn's clean. House is clean. The men are searching the field for anything that might be suspicious." Lance let the officer get back to it, noticing the deputy he had talked to when he came in, eyeballing him as he spoke with a large man in mirrored sunglasses. He returned to reading, seeing the possible sheriff nodding his head in his direction. They likely wanted to know what he knew, but he wasn't ready to tell them just yet. He didn't have a full picture, but he suspected it might be fuller than theirs. October 16th. Someone smashed our pumpkins last night. I can see them on the porch through the windows. Their guts have been scattered all over the porch, and their shells are lying across the yard. Daddy's still missing, and Mama won't let us leave the house. We found her on the porch this morning, and when Dale helped her inside, she sounded like something had scared her half to death. Dale didn't want Thomas and I to hear, but Mama said we needed to hear about it nonetheless. As she drank the coffee that Dale had made for her, she told us about how Daddy had called her out to the field, but it hadn't been Daddy. She had been woken up by the sound of him calling her name through the window. She'd seen someone standing there, their silhouette tall and broad like his had been. He had called her by name, and then moved towards the field as she went out in her nightshirt. The fields had been dark, the corn lit only by the silvery moon overhead, and Mama had followed the sound of crunchy husks underfoot. She could see him as she walked, and had hurried to catch up with him, but then the corn on either side had started rustling. Something was to her left, her right, behind her, and Mama felt hemmed in. She stopped following Daddy, and that was likely all that had saved her life. It seemed he had been hiding the sickle somewhere out of sight, and when he turned to slash her, she was farther back than he thought. Mama ran, bumping into one of the scarecrows as she careened into the field. Daddy was hot on her heels, and she ran blindly as she tried to lose him. The scarecrows popped up randomly as the rows of corn swung by on ghostly rails. Her legs burned and her face was wind-burnt as the stalks battered against her. She ran for her life, running on pure adrenaline. She didn't know how long she had run. She didn't know how far, and as the sun peeked up over the horizon, she collapsed on the porch in a heap as she prepared to be killed. When she opened her eyes again, it was morning, and Dale was helping her inside. There are 6 scarecrows now, and the newest one has a white suit and hat. They're all out there dancing now, swirling in the rain and rustling the corn plants. I think I can see Daddy out there if I look closely. He's still carrying the sickle, and there's something over his head, though I can't tell what it is. I'm scared. I don't understand what's going on, but I know we won't be going back into the field anytime soon. October 17th. Daddy is stalking the house from the fields. The new scarecrow, number 7, has a light pink suit. Most people would say it's supposed to be cute, but not me. It looks like old blood. Mama's standing at the window, watching Daddy as he peeks at us from the corn. His head is covered by a pumpkin now too, but it's not the same as the scarecrow's. His head is already starting to wilt, the pumpkin looking sad as he looks out through the eye holes. Thomas is crying, and Dale looks mad. He keeps pacing around, holding the old hatchet he used when we went camping. He keeps snarling out at Daddy like he's going to do something, and Mama seems worried that he will. It's getting dark now. I hope we make it till tomorrow. If you know something, Detective, it would be best if you shared it. Lance looked up from his notebook and into the reflective lenses of the sheriff. He was immensely fat, his belly pressed against his duty belt as he loomed over Detective Lance. He was grinning, but it was clear that his intentions were less than friendly. He was used to cowing his inferiors into doing what he wanted, but he might have overestimated his pull this time. Lance was not the sort to be cowed so easily. If I should learn anything that I think you need to know, Sheriff Leebrook, I'll be sure to let you know. Leebrook grinned, and Lance could see every one of his tobacco-stained teeth. That ain't quite how things work around here, hoss. We called you in on this one. That means I'm here to help you. That doesn't mean I work for you. Now, if you want me to be efficient at my job, let me work. Leebrook put his hands up and backed away, still smiling, but clearly not liking being rebuffed. Sure, you're the big-time detective after all. Lance looked back to the journal and continued reading, the cops now giving him a wide berth as they moved around him. October 18th. Dale left. He and Mama argued about it for hours, the two of them shouting in the back like they thought Thomas and I couldn't hear. Thomas has been crying in the living room, but Mama never came back out. Dale disappeared into the corn, the eighth scarecrow seeming to turn to the side to admit him. This one's wearing a black suit, making him look like a reaper. When he turned back to look at the house, I could clearly see the scowl that was sketched into his face, making it look different from the rest. It's dark now. I can see my breath as it steams out of my mouth. Thomas is shivering, and Mama still hasn't come out of the back room. I can see the ice swirling on the glass. The corn outside is rattling differently tonight. I can hear the ice breaking off as it hits the ground. The scarecrows are very close now. I can see them in the dark, the moon casting their shadows across our home. The shadows slide greasily into the farmhouse, and I moved Thomas away from them and put him to bed on the couch instead. We're both wrapped in one of Mama's old Afghans, but it's so cold. It's almost hard to write. My fingers are so numb, and I don't think I'll be able to write much longer. Someone's coming out of the corn, someone on a horse. Daddy's with him, Dale too, and he's wearing armor like a knight. He has deer antlers on his head, and there's an axe over his shoulder. I can see his eyes. They're red like coals, and they're burning under his helmet. The closer he gets, the more frozen the windows get. I can't see anything now. It's too icy, but I can hear the clip-clop of his horse's hooves. I know I should be scared, but the cold is sinking in, and I'm getting tired. Thomas has stopped shivering, and I think I'm going to close my eyes for a few minutes. Lance felt his breath hitch as he read the last entry. The handwriting here was cramped, almost illegible, the scribbles of a child who was learning to write. He stood up suddenly, taking the notebook with him as he went for the door. The big-bellied sheriff tried to step in his path, but Lance sidestepped him, never stopping. The sheriff cawed angrily behind him, but Lance was out the door and across the dooryard before anyone could stop him. They would never find the family, no more than they would find any of the others who had disappeared under similar circumstances. As he drove away, he was already on the phone with the only person who might be able to use this information. "Steve, it's Lance. I've got something you need to see. I think I might have more information about your Green Man case." My boss was smiling as he tossed the flyer on my desk. I could see Jasper and Marcus turning to smile at me as well as I picked up the notice and scowled at it. I've been at Farseer News for about 6 months now, but it's far from my first brush with journalism. I used to write for a news source in Washington. I won't name them. They probably don't want to be brought into all of this. And before that, I wrote for my college newspaper. That's where I received my degree in English and journalism. And that was back when my future seemed bright. I worked as a journalist for 6 years, but That was before everything went to hell. I won't go into details, but it was a story that everyone said I should have left alone. I wouldn't, though. I was young and still looking for my big break, and the story seemed perfect. It was, I guess, perfectly capable of ripping my career to shreds, that is. When it was all said and done, no one would touch me. Couldn't even get a job cleaning toilets in a building with news ties, and I'd thought it was over. Until the call came from Farseer. It's a paper in Gavin, one of the largest cities in the tri-state area, but it's as far from D.C. as it gets in terms of journalism. Out here, I'd be covering cattle auctions and ladies' auxiliary bake sales and state fairs. I started to turn them down, but after some rumination and a lot of alcohol, I decided that it might be just the thing to fix my credibility. Maybe after a few years of writing about less sensational stories, I could go back to writing about, serious topics again. I could fix my image, maybe find a little public corruption to open the shades on, and get on with something more grand. I could work my way back into the industry and get my name back. Then I'd find somewhere away from politics and get back on my feet. I couldn't have known, however, that the head of my department was someone who liked to screw with people. My boss, Andrew, and his buddies, Jasper and Marcus, are as far from journalists as you can get. They all have degrees from the local community college in English or journalism, but the dynamic around the bullpen is more like the one you'd find in the office. Andrew is the Michael Scott of our department, handing down judgments and comedy in equal parts. Marcus is like a less likable Jim, and Jasper is the Stanley, older and constantly sleeping through his deadlines. I guess that makes me the Dwight, and they don't mind using me for the butt of their jokes. You should have seen Andrew during my interview as he realized my credentials. He looked almost gleeful at the prospect of having a real journalist on his team that he could mess with. Case in point, the flyer he had just tossed down was for the closing of a local institution in the neighboring town of Foreman. The closing of a discount warehouse store that had existed on the corner of Beck and Mills since the Depression. "What's this?" I said, looking up from a story that I'd been writing about last week's big event. "That is your assignment for today, old junior field journalist." Junior field journalist was another thing that Andrew had made up to demean me. He knew I'd been a hotshot columnist in the big city and decided to take me down a peg with the big stories he handed down. The stories were everything from dog fashion shows to pumpkins that looked a little like Elvis. He found the obscure stories seemingly from nowhere, and he handed them to me with the air of someone bestowing great honor on a lesser. He mostly did it so he and the other community college journalists could laugh at me as I went off to chase the story. "Can't anyone else do this? I'm working on the governor's Clean Air Initiative piece." "Actually, I sent your notes over to Jasper, so you'd have a free afternoon to give this story your full attention." I ground my teeth and listened to my molars groan like sails in a high breeze. "You did what?" "No need to thank me. I mean, it's not every day that a historic institution like the Discount Warehouse goes out of business. We want your full attention on this story so you can tell us all about the last great sale on this time capsule of Americana. Feel free to use that line if you like," he said, walking off as Marcus and Jasper snickered at me. The whole thing just felt way too much like the actions of a cartoon villain. With little choice left, I packed up my things and went off to chase the story. I was fuming as I drove the 30-odd miles to Foreman. I was tired of being treated this way by people who had learned everything about news reporting from their high school AV club. The stories that the Farseer took on were often fluff pieces, and sometimes even borderline tabloid news. For every serious story we took on, there were a dozen others about beauty pageant winners and food eating contests and pieces just labeled local color. I was sick of being stuck with these nothing filler bits. What's worse is that they weren't even anything you could hang a new career on. No respectable paper would want to see your name attached to a drunken fiddle contest, and no one would be impressed by my dissertation on the Little Miss Southwest regional pageant. I'd been hoping to craft this into a new start, but it looked like I'd be stuck at the farseer for the foreseeable future. The money was nice, though, so I guess that was a plus. The interstate was fairly uneventful, and I arrived in Foreman without too much fanfare. When they tell you that Gavin is the largest city in the tri-state area, they mean it. Gavin, as it happens, has a population of about 25,000 on a good census year. The whole area is very rural, which means there's a lot of very nice cow fields and pigs to look at as you drive. Gavin has 5 restaurants, a city hall, a public pool, a drive-in, several strip malls that are slowly expiring, and a Walmart that's usually being sold by one of the $5 generals in the area. There's 20 traffic lights in the whole town, and the rest of the roads are watched over by stop signs and good manners. If Gavin is a big town, then Foreman is a pothole. You can tell when you're pulling into Foreman because of the seemingly endless array of trailer parks on the outskirts. They have cute little names like Shady Pines and Whispering Oaks or Sunnydale, but what they amount to is a sea of plastic and chrome that stretches for well over 10 miles. I'm pretty certain that the trailer parks are bigger than the whole town, but that's just a guess. As sad as all that humanity on display is, the town is downright tragic. There was once a thriving burg here, I've been told, but it relied mostly on the pulpwood industry and the small coal mining operation that took place in the area. Now the coal's played out, the pulpwood's going out, and Foreman is a town that seems unaware that it's dying. If you drive up the main street, you can see more buildings for rent than that are open. It has a city municipal building that doubles as a city hall, a working railroad that will likely outlive the town, and several strip malls with the usual collection of pizza joints and cell phone stores. A few pawn shops and hardware stores seem to be struggling along, but the only thing in Foreman doing any business is the Moosehead pub and the small local police force waiting for drunks outside said pub. I suppose the lack of business was why I was here, though. I kept expecting to see a Walmart or at least a Dollar General or a Family Dollar, but the longer I drove without seeing one, the odder it felt. Had Discount Warehouse been that big of an institution? I suppose the little discount chains would pop up like mushrooms now that Thriftmeyer was forced to loosen his grip on the region. Discount Warehouse sat in a historical building that had once been a Thriftmeyer all-goods store. Mr. Thriftmeyer, who I assume had changed his name for marketing reasons, had owned a chain of Thriftmeyer all-goods stores across the Tri-County area. They rebranded as Discount Warehouse in the late 70s and incorporated furniture and housewares into the business model. Discount Warehouse was more like a small Walmart or a large Dollar General, and the economy had started weeding them out in the late 2000s. This was the last of the Thriftmeyer line, and today would end his legacy as a houseware and small appliance juggernaut. You like that? It's the opening of my article, and all with nothing more than 30 minutes in the car and a Google search. I did a little more looking and discovered that the Thriftmeyers still own the chain. Thriftmeyer Sr. had died around the time of the rebranding, 1978 it said, but his son was just as business savvy as his old man, it appeared. Jacob Thriftmeyer Jr. had been running his father's store since the mid-20s, and he was still managing the store well into his 80s. The article said that he had hoped to rebrand again and keep the business open, but the bank had other ideas and would no longer extend their loan. The store had been operating in the red for years, and the tab had finally come due. Jacob Thriftmeyer had begrudgingly signed over his business to the bank and was getting ready to enter retirement. I felt for the old guy, but I suppose all good things had to come to an end. I wasn't exactly sure I would call the parking lot I was currently in a good thing, however. The building was a large brick box with a black awning that appeared to have been added after the fact. The doors were not the fancy sliding ones that most stores had, but large glassed ones with handles that jutted out from the front. The concrete parking lot was old and rutted, the pavement in sad need of leveling and replaning. The people who had gathered here looked like cattle at an auction, and they all just sort of milled about aimlessly. There were some kids among them, pale youths holding their parents' hands, and it was here that I saw some emotion. Most of them were jittering around like kids will do, and all of them seemed to possess a certain air of excitement. As I got out of the car, notebook in hand, I went to join the collected humanity. I heard the snap of an elastic from overhead and looked up to see small flags that had been hung on a rope running from the awning to the light poles that dotted the parking lot. They were black and white, the wind pushing them aimlessly, and it made me think of a funeral. This whole event was a funeral, I supposed, and as I got close, a banner fell to block the awning, and the illusion was complete. It was black with white letters, and the sentiment seemed very fitting later on. "Everything must go," it proclaimed, and the sight of it gave me the willies. A small stage had been erected, and there was a cheery man in a cheap suit standing beside an old, stooped man in a much nicer suit. He had to be Jacob Thriftmeyer, Jr., but the younger man was unknown to me. He was beaming out at the crowd, looking happy to be there, or anywhere on such a day as this. He glanced towards the sky as the wind snapped at the flags, and his smile seemed to wither a little. The clouds were becoming dark, and it looked like the weather might wash out the last great deal of the discount warehouse. Would everything still go in the rain? I supposed it would, and I was right. I wish I hadn't been. I'm proud to see so many of Foreman's finest out to say goodbye to the city's institution that's been here since the town was little more than a logging hub. Logging hub might have been a stretch, but I supposed this was the mayor of Foreman. I've shopped here with my family for as long as I can remember, and the deals we've all found at the discount warehouse were like nothing seen anywhere else. Jacob Thriftmeyer has helped keep the specter of corporate greed from overtaking our town, and we will be sorry to see him go. Mr. Thriftmeyer himself would like to say a few words, and I think we owe him that much." The applause were scattered and half-hearted, and the old man approached the mic slowly before trying to lower it to his level. The banner kept catching my attention, and it just seemed off somehow. Everything must go. I'd never thought about that statement before, but it was a little foreboding if you looked at it in a certain light. The kind of light that hovered around here, for example. Everything must go. If everything went, then what would be left? Would Foreman remain? Would Gavin be safe? How much would be left behind once everything had gone? The reedy voice of Jacob Thriftmeyer, Jr. brought me back to the stage. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My father opened up Thriftmore All Goods a year before the Great Depression sunk its claws into this country. I have strived to keep his legacy afloat, but it seems I have failed. I have failed this town. I failed all of you. And now we must pay the price." I furrowed my brow as I took a shorthand missive of the speech. This was a weird one, even for the ramblings of a geriatric store owner. The people seemed as confused as he was, but the children seemed to know already. While the parents stood in polite boredom, the children were looking around with what I thought was excitement, but I quickly realized was fear. Their neck hair was up for some reason, and they all seemed on the edge of fleeing. It was like house pets just before a tornado hits. They sense the change in pressure, the change in the air, but they can do nothing but wait for it to hit and hope it doesn't simply squash them flat. That should have been a warning. but I ignored it yet again. I was here to get a story, and I meant to be done with it before the whole day was wasted. This store held the town together, in hard times and good times. Many of you have bought your furniture here for your first place, the crib for your first baby, the groceries for your last meal. But today, it all comes to an end. Today is the final moments of Foreman. So, drink them in while you can. The mayor was looking at him oddly, some of those who had come to watch looking as if his words had broken through their daze. The children, however, stood straight as fence posts, just waiting for whatever was to come. They seemed to sense the portents, and I remember thinking that some of them might make it out, though I didn't know why the thought had occurred. Make it out of what? What would they need to escape? I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but this store has not existed on its own for all these years. When my father opened his doors in 1932, he was full of hope for the future. He just knew that this would bring his family stability, bring them wealth, and so it did. Even through the Great Depression, Dad made money hand over fist, and he was very generous with the community. Foreman thrived because of my father's money, but somewhere along the way, you all forgot that. The mayor's pasted-on smile was beginning to slip, but when he reached for the mic, Jacob Thriftmeyer gave him a stony look, and he backed away. Thriftmeyer was going to say his piece, and there was nothing anyone could do about it. It's true, and you all know it's true. I kept the riffraff out. I kept the Dollar Generals and the Family Dollars and even the likes of Sam Walton's monstrosity out of this town. And how did you all repay me? You turned your noses up at the local businesses, at the businesses that had made this town great, and you drove to Gavin or Bryson or he spat onto the hot top, McAllister, to shop at Walmart and Target and Costco as the town died around you. You put pennies over people, and now you reap what you have sown. He looked out across the crowd, looking furious with them as they looked down sheepishly. I was astonished. Did he blame them for the fall of his empire? Don't bother looking contrite. I know what all of you think. I know you think that those vultures will be here to nibble my corpse once my store is closed. But you are wrong. You don't live as long as I have without picking up some tricks. And today, I give you all my last deal. He wetted his lips, preparing to speak the words that must be spoken. He turned to the doors, and when he thrust his hands toward them, they opened to reveal the horror they had been holding at bay. Everything must go! As he said it, the doors came open and a thick black smoke came pouring out. It was almost like floating tar, the cloud impenetrable as it hovered out. The effect was galvanizing. The sleepy crowd began to murmur and then to back away. They were unsure what to make of this, but as they got closer, they began to scream and run from the encroaching smoke bank. Some of them, however, stood mesmerized by it. Some walked towards it, and those who disappeared into it were lost within that smoke. I saw most of this, however, from the inside of my car. The final declaration, the negation of the town itself, had moved me as it had moved the doors, and I was bringing my car to life before I realized I had moved at all. The car seemed sluggish to start, the engine making a sleepy grinding noise as it came to life, and before pulling away from the store, I looked back at the old man as he stood atop the podium. His hands were raised in exaltation, his eyes cast skyward, and as the cloud pressed against his back, I thought it might reject him for the briefest of moments. Then it gobbled him up, along with the stunned mayor, and I was leaving the lot on squealing tires. As I drove out of town, I saw the smoke rising behind me. It swallowed the town in a plume of thick gray death, but it seemed I was the only vehicle leaving town. The people I passed on the sidewalk, the ones coming out to look at the cloud, seemed to be mesmerized by all that smoke. They didn't run like the others had, the ones out in front of the store, and I was tempted to stop and shout at them. I wanted them to run, to escape the smoke, but most of them seemed to have accepted their fate. The farther I drove, the more I feared that the smoke would never stop and would simply engulf everything. Every mile I drove, the less I believed I would make it home. When I made it to my apartment, it hardly filled me with a sense of serenity. I'm on the couch now, my phone ringing off the hook as the office tries to get a hold of me. They want to know the same thing the news anchors want to know. What happened to Foreman? They say the town is simply missing, the smoke cloud having cleared to reveal raw earth and nothing else. The streets, the buildings, the trailer parks, the main street, everything was gone. It had been removed down to the dirt, and no one seemed to have escaped whatever it was that had happened. They were looking for witnesses, for anyone with information, and my boss and his friends seemed to be doing the same. I guess I was the only one who'd seen what happened, and it was something that would stick with me for a long time. I don't know what to do now, but I know one thing for sure. The sign didn't lie. Everything had to go, so everything went. I looked at the ad, unsure if my fever-addled brain was reading it right. Wanted, someone to infect me with the COVID-19 virus. Must be verified as sick, have paperwork verifying illness no older than 2 days from today's date, and be willing to allow me to spend time near them. Will pay $500 for 8 hours in your company. Contraction of virus notwithstanding. Please email me immediately, with an email address attached. I had only been infected by the virus for the last 3 days, but I had been affected by it for the last 2 months. I had been laid off from work after a drop in profits had caused the store to go into bankruptcy. My boss had been very apologetic, but he still hadn't been able to keep the doors open. We had all hit the unemployment line after that, but unemployment wasn't as good as overtime. I'll admit, I had been living a little outside my means, and the bills were starting to pile up. Getting sick had ended my job search, and $500 was going to go a long way to settling my debt and keeping the lights on. And all that for letting a stranger hang out in my house for 8 hours sounded like a dream come true. I contacted him, and he offered to come over that very night, cash in hand. We discussed hours. I'm a dedicated night owl, and he agreed to come over at about 6 p.m. His knock dragged me out of my stupor at around 5:45, and I staggered up to get the door. I didn't expect to be greeted by a well-dressed man in his mid-30s. I'd expected a weirdo, maybe some disease fetishist who got off on being sick, but this guy was surprisingly well put together. He wore black slacks, a button-down shirt, no mask, and his brown hair was close-cropped with a square pair of little gold glasses that made him look like a banker. He shook my hand, something no one had done in a while, and took an envelope of money out of his pocket. He showed me 5 crisp $100 bills, and then I led him into the living room. He sat in my armchair, leaning in close as I sagged back onto the couch and stared at me intently. "So, what do we do now?" I asked. He shrugged. "Just whatever you usually do. Watch TV, play video games, whatever. Hopefully my proximity will be all it takes to get the disease, and I'll achieve my goal." "I had wondered about that," I said, sneezing into a Kleenex and wincing as he leaned in closer. "This disease is supposed to be pretty bad. Why exactly do you want it?" "I'd tell you, but honestly it would sound crazy," he said with a chuckle. I shrugged. "It's not like we got anything else to do but watch Netflix for 8 hours. Tell me, it'll make the time pass. He glanced over at my bookshelf, eyes roaming as though he was looking for something particular, before settling on and taking a paperback from the middle. It was a newer book, Fields of the Foregone, and he nodded as he inspected the spine. He must have liked what he saw because he smiled and held the book out to me. I see you're a fan of my work. I'll sign it for you if you want, but my books are part of the reason I'm here. I squinted at him. Are you Timothy Corvin? The guy who writes the Ghostgrass series? He nodded. Yep, 3-time New York Times bestseller. I gaped at him for a few seconds before asking my next question. Why the hell are you at my apartment trying to get sick? He smiled, but the smile was sad. You could say that the writing is why I'm here. He sat down again and made himself comfortable before telling me the strangest story I'd ever heard. I got sick about a month ago. It came on quickly, cough, fever, typical flu-like symptoms, but I assured my agent that it wouldn't be an issue. I'd finish my latest novel and have it on her desk by the end of the month. First couple of days weren't so bad. I was still lucid, and I managed to get some work done. I was trucking right along, making good progress, when the real sickness hit. Suddenly I was feverish, scatterbrained, and I could hardly focus long enough to get off the couch. I spent my days in a stupor, high on cold medicine and barely coherent. My nights consisted of rolling around in a fever-fueled daze that made me question whether I was dreaming or awake. I had these dreams, you see. I say dreams because I can't remember them, but I couldn't do anything but remember them then. I would sit on the couch and mumble about them all day, reeling through their world as I tried to wrap my head around them. I raised an eyebrow at him. It sounds pretty bad. Sounds like you didn't get a lot done. Oh, quite the contrary. The longer I raved about the stories, the more I started to write about them. Not so much writing, I guess. I read through my notes the other day, and it was more like drunken ramblings. At some point, I moved on to chronicling them. I would come to at my computer, banging away at a story, not sure what I was doing or how long I'd been doing it. The stories were great, but they were so far outside of what I normally did that I couldn't wrap my incoherent brain around them. As the fever started getting worse, I would slip into these fugue states and just write for hours on end. One day I came out of one and found I had an email from my agent. I had sent her a draft for one of the stories. I was so worried. These stories were really weird, completely batty, and I was afraid that she would drop me as a client if she read what my fever-swallowed brain had cooked up. He took a sip from his coffee then, wetting his pipes, and my own fever-addled brain became a little impatient. So, what did she think? Oh, she loved it. She said it was the most unique thing she had ever read, the most unique thing she had read in ages, and wanted to know when I was going to be done with it. Reading through what I had sent her and the stuff I was working on before I got better, I can see what she was talking about. It is both similar to so many things and completely different. It's a timeless story that sits completely outside of the normal processes. It seems to contain two antagonists and no hero, a war with nothing but loss and stakes that don't seem to make any sense. It was almost Lovecraftian, and I found myself as interested in hearing how it turned out as she was. But that was where the problem arose. He looked at my glass of water longingly, and I slid it across the table to him. If he wanted to get sick, then more power to him. He was paying after all, so he might as well get his money's worth. He reached out and brought it to his lips, throat working as he swallowed. I tried not to gag. There was probably backwash in that. My meds were squashing the fever that was keeping my brain in its altered state of mind. I was always careful never to ride it for too long, but the high was more than a little intoxicating. I would time travel in those moments, starting on my couch and coming to at my computer as I finished more pages than I'd ever done. I throttled back on my meds a little, wanting to stretch this out for as long as I could, but eventually my body started to get better. My fugue states became fewer and fewer. I found that I couldn't tap into that hidden world, and the story wasn't something that I could just make up as I went along. It was unknown, unheard of, and my mind couldn't begin to tap into that place by itself. My agent was wild to have more, wanting an ending, wanting a sequel, and that's when I started thinking about contracting it again. I lifted an eyebrow at him. I know that's what brought you here. That's what you told me on the phone, but I still have a hard time believing that you want this crap. It's miserable. Between the headaches and the near constant fever, I seem to mostly exist in a state of misery. Some people are experiencing it even worse than I have. What if you get the kind that's really bad and you're hospitalized? It seems like that would put a damper on your writing. He shrugged. That's the thing. Even when I'm experiencing the same symptoms as you, I still get the urge to write. I don't know if it's subconscious or what, but my brain takes over and forces my body to keep writing. Maybe it's not even my conscious mind. Maybe it's this place, and I've been tapped when I'm in these fugue states. I've had this thing 3 times now, you know. If I had had water in my hand, I would have probably did a spit take. 3 times? My God, you rarely hear of anybody getting it more than twice. After I got better the first time, I was struggling to keep up, he said, suddenly looking far away. I tried faking it, but it just wasn't the same. My agent started to notice. She started to send my stuff back with notes like, I need more of the voice you had in the first draft. I started getting desperate. She told me that she shared my notes with some of her colleagues, and they were very excited about how it was all coming together. So I started putting the pieces together and decided that I needed to recreate the situation. You needed to get sick again, I said. He nodded. I needed to get sick again. I started slowly, waiting in hospitals and waiting rooms, looking for sick people, but I became desperate after a while. I got lucky the first time, a chance encounter with a sick friend. One trip to their apartment, and I was back where I started, feverish and coughing on my couch as I waited for the time skips to start. Did they? Would I still be running the ad if they hadn't? This time, though, something was different. This time I was treated to some of the most vivid dreams I've ever had. I wasn't just hearing about my 2 antagonists. I could see them. I watched them play their shadow games, maneuver their pieces, snatch territory only to lose it again. All the while I was chronicling them. It became a mania for me. I refused to take anything to dull the fever this time, but it didn't seem to matter. After a week, my fever was abating, and I was back to trying to fake it. But I couldn't fake it. I wouldn't even try. I needed the dreams. I needed the visions. I needed the writing fits that I never remembered. That was when I started running the ads. The lady at the paper didn't want to run them at first. She said I was sick, but once I offered to pay her triple the going rate, she caved. As I watched him talk about it, I reflected that he did look pretty sick. Not physically, but mentally, I mean. He looked like an addict describing his favorite drug. As he talked, he scratched at his arm, his face taking on a smiling rictus as he described the visions. I began to wonder just how this disease, or maybe it was the story that had affected him. I wanted to tell him to leave off for his own good, but I really did need the money. I've sunk nearly $5,000 into getting this disease. Did I tell you that? Every time I post the ad, someone responds. After so many, though, my body has built up antibodies to it, and every time I get it, it's a little less effective. The last time I contracted it, I barely had it for a week. I was so anxious to get any work out of it that I don't think I got more than 30 pages the whole week. 30 pages? I gasped. I was no writer, but that seemed like a prolific amount of work for a sick person. I know. What a disgrace. The first time I was nearly averaging 30 pages a day, but after the first time I never managed it again. You were getting that much a day? His eyes glazed a little. He didn't seem pleased with what he saw, and he looked at my popcorn ceiling. I see them constantly. I simply can't make sense of it on my own. I can't convey something like storms battling for supremacy, tectonic plates crashing against each other as they try to change the land. The fugues allow me to tap into something primal that could understand these ideas. My puny lizard brain just can't make anything out of it. You know, reading these things I've written, understanding only enough of what I've written, scares me a little. How much of your book have you written? I asked, not sure I wanted an answer. He scratched again, still uncomfortable, but wanting to discuss his drug of choice nonetheless. I've written 5 books. I've cataloged the lives of these 2 from the moment of their birth to the very last encounter they had directly. I gaped at him. He was talking about 5 books in what must have been a matter of months. I couldn't even consider something like that, and I began to wonder how large they were. The pages, the volume he was talking about per day surely meant that these were no small books. He didn't seem to understand where these stories were coming from either, which made them all the more mysterious and unknown. Can you tell me about them? He gave me a dead-eyed look, and I almost regretted asking. It's not something people really want to know in the end. This little experiment started as a way to write the next great fantasy series, but my agent stopped returning my emails about 3 weeks ago. The last 2 endeavors have been solely so I could learn how it ends, how we end. We? Humanity. We are the ultimate prize that these 2 creatures fight over. More specifically, they fight over the right to subjugate and entertain themselves with us. We see their battles as normal. We see their battles as nothing but the changing of the seasons, but they see them as nothing short of war. I can tell you, but you won't want to know once I'm done. I didn't really want to know anymore, but I felt like I had to know. In the end, my curiosity was stronger than my fear. He spent the next 10 hours telling me about the battle between the Green Man and the Pale Lady. He told me of their beginnings in Strange, their emergence, and their eventual exile, and how they came to be on this plane of existence in the first place. He told me about the Brandylow, the servants of the Pale Lady, and the numerous agents of the Green Man. He told me how this green warrior was worshipped as a pagan deity, how he took his sacrifices, and how he sought out those who ran. It's funny how 10 hours can seem like a half hour when someone is telling you about the eldritch deities that you never knew you wanted to know about. When the alarm on my phone went off, reminding me to take my meds, I realized that it was 6 a.m. and the sun was coming up. Timothy got up, checking his own phone, and seemed to realize that he'd been talking all night. Seems I've gone over my time a little. Here, as promised, he said, taking out the money and handing it to me as he left. Wait, I said, dropping the envelope and coming shakily from the couch. How does it end? He looked back and shrugged. Hopefully I'll find out. If I do, I'll let you know. Then he left, and I wouldn't hear from him for another 3 months. Well, I'd never hear from him again, but he would make good on his promise. I felt better by the end of the week, my fever breaking and my headache getting better and better. I finally acquired a negative test and started looking for work again. I got lucky. The bar up the road was hiring, and they needed someone to start right away. They had only recently been allowed to reopen, and the bartender was working double duty as the bar back to help out. Before I knew it, I was bussing tables and hauling kegs like an old pro. I enjoyed the work, though it wasn't something I'd ever done before, and it felt nice to get back to work after a long absence. Then, one afternoon, I was helping my boss open, flipping on the TV and preparing to tune in to one of the sports channels like I often did. That's when I saw the little squib on the news that made me stop. The city is mourning the death of local writer Timothy Corvin, who died of COVID-related symptoms in St. Graham's this morning. Mr. Corvin, the writer of the Ghostgrass series, is survived by his father and his older sister. Service will be held Tuesday for his friends and family at... I couldn't believe it. The guy had been in my house not even a month ago. Had I killed him? Had he contracted his fatal disease from me? I had to sit down. I didn't know what to make of it. My boss must have noticed that something was off because he tried to send me home, wondering if I still had some latent symptoms of being sick. I told him I was fine, though, and I went back to work. As I worked, I wondered if he'd discovered the end he was looking for. I got my answer in the mail a couple of months later. A package was waiting on the stoop. I hadn't ordered anything, and the return address was from Samantha Drummond. The delivery address was mine, though, so I brought it inside and opened it. Inside was a manuscript, bound in twine with no title across the surface. On the top of the journal was a typed note from Mrs. Drummond informing me of her package's purpose. Hello, my brother requested that I send this to you after he passed. He was very adamant that it be placed in your care. All the best, Mrs. Drummond. I lifted out the journal, opening the front page and bearing a message written in a shaky hand. I found the end. Let's hope it helps you after I'm gone. I've been sitting here looking at the book for close to an hour, not sure whether I should read it or just burn it. If the beings Timothy had talked about had been using his infected body as a mouthpiece, I'm not sure I want to open my mind to them. This book contains their history, contains their past, present, and future, and this knowledge was gained at the cost of a life. Will they come to infect me if I subject myself to this arcane wisdom? That knowledge scares me more than a little as I put the journal back in the box and carry it to my room. I decided to put it in the closet for now. Some things are better left unknown, I think.